Yo, what is going on, everybody? My name is Dominic. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over every film that I watched in the month of October. I started off the month by watching a new release directed by Antoine Fuqua called The Guilty, and it was actually a pretty good film to start off the month. I thought it was a pretty well done, sort of isolated film, a little sort of thriller, phone thriller almost. So it's about like a 911 operator who kind of gets a call and he's trying to figure out the case of this abducted woman. And I don't want to say too much because part of the whole plot basically revolves around that like whole series of phone calls, and that's where all the tension comes from. But the tension is really well done. I think it is very well directed, and the stories of how this film was made are really interesting, and I think it kind of adds to my enjoyment of the film. It's not anything absolutely amazing, but it is a pretty well constructed thriller. Then for the first time I watched Friday the 13th. I know I'm a movie fan. I've never seen a horror movie as iconic as Friday the 13th, but at this point I have seen it and I did really enjoy it. It is very cheesy, and it is a film that I would definitely like throw on in the background just while, I have to do something, but I want something to watch in the background. It's a pretty easy, not needing your full attention sort of watch. I think a lot of the actual kills and like the gore and stuff were actually really well done, and it is my favorite Friday the 13th movie that I've seen so far, so if that means anything, then I did really enjoy the film, to be honest. Then basically directly after that I decided to watch Friday the 13th Part 2, and this is a film that I didn't enjoy as much. It felt way more slow-paced and uninteresting, and even though Jason was the actual killer in this film, you didn't get to see his iconic look, and the kills felt less inspired to me for some reason. I don't know, it just felt more like a film that was trying to kind of just bank on the Friday the 13th name after the crazy success that was the first film, at least in comparison to its budget. So it felt a little uninspired with that in terms of its plot and the kills and all that sort of stuff, but it was still a pretty fun time nonetheless. And I watched The Omen with my parents, and it was actually a decent film. I thought it was very slow paced, not in a necessarily good way. There are films that are very slow paced that I do really enjoy, and I think when that is done right, it is really amazing, and it helps like make the film better. But when a film isn't necessarily trying to be slow paced, or when it doesn't land this slow pacing, I think it really hurts the film. It's a detriment to the film's enjoyment, for me personally at least. And I don't know, this film was just really boring at a lot of parts, and it dragged a ton. The interesting parts were pretty intense and pretty interesting, but those were pretty few and far between. Overall, it's like a genuinely pretty interesting story, and it had me at least somewhat hooked for most of the story, so still a decent watch. Then I watched the film Jigoku, which I've been wanting to watch for quite a while now, and I found a little similarities between this and Hausu from 1977, I believe. They are both kind of these films that have a somewhat like whimsical and like surrealist kind of property to them. They feel way like they have some parts that make the film feel kind of grounded, but then most of the time it's just really wild and crazy. I mean, Jigoku first half was very realistic, and it was kind of a melodrama that I did not care about at all, and that's what brought this film down a ton for me. But then the last bit was so phenomenal and just absolutely incredible in terms of the set designs and the lighting and the colors and all that sort of stuff, that it really brought up the film. Like, it was really boring, but then it was really good. And I do think I prefer Hausu because it was more consistently wild, and I kind of have grown to appreciate how crazy it was. But this film just was really boring in the beginning and then had that really crazy bit. So I'm really conflicted on it, but I think it's just an okay film for now. Then I decided I wanted to rewatch Mon Oncle because I just needed a break from horror movies, and it just is still absolutely phenomenal. I mean, this film will always be a masterpiece to me. It's not like one of the technical best movies ever made, but the amount of pure enjoyment and just absolute joy I get from watching this film is absolutely unparalleled. It's just so much fun to watch. There was a short stint where this was my favorite Jacques Tati film, and I can't even say that I was surprised because this film is so amazing, but I think it's fair to say that even though this won't be my favorite Tati film, at least anytime soon in the future, this is still a film that I'll always absolutely love to death. Then I watched a sort of short version of the Planet of the Apes movie from 1968, where it was kind of a reimagining of the film with a sort of Twilight Zone feel. So it was in black and white with that old aspect ratio, and it was cut down significantly to kind of fit into a Twilight Zone episode runtime. And I didn't rate it because I feel like it's not necessarily the official Planet of the Apes film, and it's not an official Twilight Zone episode, and it kind of just didn't feel right to rate it. But I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. It helps that I really enjoyed this film just in the first place, and the fact that it kind of felt like a feature-length Twilight Zone episode made this feel right. But I think it is a little hard for me to say that it's better, because Planet of the Apes has the story, it has a script, and it has all this build up and stuff, and cutting a big chunks of that out makes it feel rushed and not right, because it already is, you know, crafted to fit this like runtime. And so there were parts that felt a little choppy, but the overall experience was really, really cool. And if you're a fan of this film, I highly recommend it. You can find it online on like some Internet Archives website. It's really, really cool. And I decided to rewatch Taxi Driver. I've been wanting to rewatch this one for a long time, and I finally got around to doing it, and I just absolutely love this movie now. It is a masterpiece in my opinion. It is just so phenomenally well done. It's pretty hard to articulate my thoughts, but Robert De Niro gives a phenomenal performance, and there's a lot of good commentary going on here, and I felt like the first time I watched this film, the sort of political stuff felt really out of place, but this time around it felt more in tune to the story in my opinion, and just the entire film just felt so seamless. And the atmosphere is just absolutely incredible. The way it portrays New York City as this dirty, grimy, gross place, sort of how Travis sees it, is really, really good. And it's phenomenally well written. And the score is one of the best of all time. It's just an overall fantastic film. Then I decided to rewatch The Ten Commandments. This is a film that, despite what anyone says about it, I will always really enjoy this film. I don't know why, I always have and I always will, but these sort of Bible stories, for some reason, really interest me. I find them really intriguing a lot of the time, and it's a really, really well done film, especially for the time it came out in 1956. The absolute scale of this movie was unprecedented. It is just huge in scale, and it's just really interesting and well done. So it's very slow paced and a super long movie, but every second of this film is important and interesting, and I just think it's so well done. And I think that Charlton Heston gives a great performance as Moses. He's really, really great. I love him as an actor. But I think the standout here is, I think you pronounce it Yul Brynner or Brynner. I'm not really 100% sure, but he's the guy who played Ramses, and he was absolutely phenomenal in this movie. And so, yeah, this is just a film that, I mean, I can't necessarily recommend this to everyone, but I just enjoy the hell out of this. Then I decided to watch my first Michael Haneke movie, or Haneke. I'm not very good with these kind of names. But I watched Funny Games for the first time, and I mean, if you know me, you know I don't love being super uncomfortable during films, and this movie didn't really give me much except for being uncomfortable and kind of squeamish and squirmy. It was very uncomfortable to watch. It was very disturbing. It was a well-made film technically, but a lot of the time, like most of these times, I'm rating films based on enjoyment. So technical elements can add to the enjoyment of these films. That's why a lot of my favorite films I consider to be some of the best, and a lot of other people consider to be some of the best films ever made, because obviously if a film is really well made, it's going to contribute to my enjoyment of it. but funny games and other movies like it when they're just so disturbing, and I just can't get behind that. You know, I can appreciate some of the filmmaking, but not enough to make me actually enjoy the film. I don't know, it just, something about it did not sit right with me at all. I did watch the whole thing, and it just really didn't do that much for me at all. It's enough to make me somewhat mildly interested in the rest of Michael Haneke's work, but not anything I'll be revisiting. Then I decided to rewatch Star Wars, the original from 1977. This time I found Harmy's Despecialized edition, and I watched it. It is basically the original version from 1977 without the sort of, you know, re-edits and CGI implemented from like the 90s and stuff like that. It was just pure, you know, actual practical effects and all that sort of stuff that was like when it came out in 1977. It's that version of the film, and it makes it just that much better. It is so much fun, and it even tightens up the pacing a little bit. It takes away some of the worst shots in the film, especially in Mos Eisley, and it just is amazing. You know, a film that was already pretty close to flawless just absolutely takes that step up, and it is just so fantastic. I highly recommend everyone try and watch this despecialized version if you're going to rewatch this film. You can find it on, there's like an Internet Archive website, but if you look up like watch Harmy's Despecialized Edition Star Wars online, you probably should be able to find it. Then I had a very long car ride, and then I'm like, what better time to watch Jean Dielman? And I actually watched the whole thing in one sitting, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know what got into me, but something about this film is super interesting despite it being very boring at the same time. Like, there's absolutely nothing happening for most of the film, but it's so, the way everything is framed and shot and the way it kind of moves and the pacing really like grabs you and takes you into the experience. It's super weird. I know I'm gonna sound like a crazy person for you guys. Like, I've literally made fun of people liking this movie in the past, like jokingly, because of because nothing happens, and now I'm one of those people. So yeah. Then I watched The Raven, another classic Universal horror film, I believe, and it is just really well done. I mean, I love Bela Lugosi in this film. I also love Boris Karloff. I think Karloff might even be a little bit better, and the way they have this sort of dynamic is just absolutely fantastic. And it's just a really cool sort of story based on this retired neurosurgeon who's obsessed with the works of Edgar Allan Poe and has this like weird ancient torture chamber in his basement and stuff, and it's super strange, but it was really cool. Then I watched Black Widow with my entire family, and me and my brother were making fun of it the whole time because of how bland and how boring and how dumb it was. This was not very good at all. Then I rewatched Bride Frankenstein. This is one that had been on my mind for quite a while now, and I rewatched it, and I actually see much more in it than I did before. I absolutely love this movie now. It's my favorite Universal classic monster film. It's one of my favorite horror films. It's one of my favorite movies. I would definitely put this up in like my top 50 films of all time. It's really well done. A lot of how it commentates on these scientists trying to undermine God, and all these commentaries on religion and science and madness and all this sort of stuff is really well done. And when you come into this with the correct mindset of knowing that this will not be a horror film and that this will be more of a dramatic sort of film, you get that much more enjoyment out of it. So you have to go into this film with the right mindset. Also be willing to look for those small details and themes kind of scattered throughout the film, because that just makes it that much better. Then I watched George Romero's Day of the Dead. You will know how I feel about this film if you saw my George A. Romero's Dead Trilogy ranked video. I reviewed all 3 of those films in a video and then ranked them at the end. So to hear my thoughts on that, go watch that video. Then I watched the 2018 Halloween reboot with my parents because it's been a while since I'd seen a Halloween film, and this is one that I'd been wanting to see for a while, and it was actually pretty well done. I think the kills were pretty good, and for the most part, it was pretty interesting and intense, but the characters were not very interesting in my opinion, and a lot of the film felt pretty uninspired, but overall, for the most part, this film actually was not too bad, and I actually enjoyed myself. Then I rewatched Venom. I don't really have much to say. I was gonna try and do a Venom doubleheader, but I couldn't actually make it to my theaters to see this after I finished the film, so that was not possible, but whatever. The original Venom film is very mediocre, but it is a pretty fun time nonetheless. Then I watched Concussion in my kinesiology class at school, and it was really boring. I was not a fan of this film. Then I watched Halloween Kills, and this was also not very good at all. I did not like this. Then I watched The Shining. This was, I believe, my 5th viewing of the film, but this time I got to see it in a 35mm print at my local art house theater, and oh my god, the experience was absolutely phenomenal. If you have the chance to see this in theaters, I mean, obviously, if you like this movie, you've been thinking about if you can see this in theaters, but I will highly recommend it. It makes the atmosphere of the film so much crazier, and it just puts those grand, beautiful visuals on such a bigger scale kind of screen. It just is absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend this experience. It was amazing. Then I rewatched La Haine, and it is just so perfect. I mean, this movie is so phenomenal. And I actually wrote my very first sort of huge in-depth review for this film, and I know a lot of you guys have already seen that, but if you haven't, definitely go check out my Letterboxd. The link will be in the description of the video, and you can find my review on there. It is a very long review. I talk about a bunch of the themes, the characters, the technical elements like the cinematography, and I talk about a lot of the political and social commentary that this film has to offer, and I think it is all really well done. It is just an absolutely phenomenal movie, and this film just keeps moving up my favorites list. I think it's currently in my top 5 or top 10 films of all time. Just absolutely fantastic movie. Then I watched the new Dune movie, and wow, I was pretty blown away by this movie, to be honest. Okay, I was a little skeptical based on how some people were responding to the film, but I watched it with my brother, and despite the slow pacing, despite the sort of half story, this film was so good, and I mean so good. I didn't want to be too ambitious and jump the gun with how much I love this film, and so I will talk a little bit about that later, but this film was absolutely fantastic. The grand scale, the visuals, the score, the sort of, the atmosphere of it all, the characters and the performances. I think Denis Villeneuve's style really fits this sort of sci-fi, at least Dune's sci-fi story, and it's just absolutely amazing. Then I started my rewatch of the Before trilogy. This time I'm watching them all with my mom, so we watched Before Sunrise. This is back as my favorite film of all time, and I mean, at this point, I'm just going to change which is my favorite film every time I rewatch Before Sunrise, Fantastic Mr. Fox, or Playtime. I've come to kind of recognize that, but whatever, it is what it is. This movie's just absolutely perfect, and I will probably do a more in-depth video of this once I finish off the trilogy. Then I watched a Before Trilogy video essay that's available on the Before Trilogy Criterion that I own called Linklater on Cinema and Time. It is a video essay basically just about the Before Trilogy, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I would recommend you watch that if you love the trilogy and if you have access to it. Then I watched A Quiet Place with my parents and my brother, and it was a pretty decent film. Nothing incredible in my opinion. I think that it had some well done tension most of the time, but a lot of the film I felt fairly uninterested in what was happening. Then I watched Kiki's Delivery Service as a part of my sort of Studio Ghibli binge. It's been a very long binge and slow, but here and there I'll decide to watch a Ghibli movie, and I've been absolutely loving it so far. This film is no exception. It is so much fun, surprisingly emotional and heartfelt at times as well, and just a beautiful coming of age story. Something that I think Ghibli does incredibly well. Then I watched Child's Play, and it was not very good. I'm sorry. I don't know. It was not that great. It was very stupid. The story was really cheesy and not very interesting, and I mean, just literally just punt that doll, man. It's so stupid. He gets thrown around like a little baby rag doll for the entire movie, and then when he decides he wants to kill someone, they just can't do anything. pick the damn thing up and just whip that boy out your window. It's not that hard. Then I watched a Jean-Luc Godard film, Masculine Feminine, and I enjoyed it. And I think I'm a little bit scared because this is a film that made me kind of realize that maybe Godard's style is getting a little repetitive to me. I'd have to rewatch some of his films that I absolutely love, like Vivre sa vie and Breathless, before I kind of fully make that assumption. But this is a film that his style kind of was, the effect was starting to wear off on me a little bit, and even though I still really enjoyed the movie, I thought it had its boring and bland points at times. Then I rewatched Before Sunset with my mom, and we both really loved this one. We also both enjoyed Before Sunrise just a little bit more, so we have that in common, but this is still a phenomenal movie. I think I like this one more than her, but it has just some of the most profound and amazing dialogue and commentary of all time, and that car scene is the best scene of all time. I do not want to hear it. Then I rewatched Dune, and I know it was not that far after. It was like 4 days after I watched it for the first time, but after rewatch, none of the effect wore off on me whatsoever. I can confidently say that I absolutely adore this film, and it is currently in my top 25 favorite films of all time. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to stay there because it might still be a little recency bias, but this movie is incredible, and I still am thinking about this movie to this day, like every single day. Then I watched David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, and I really enjoyed the film, but I was also incredibly confused, and it's a big kind of wacky thought, and it's so just broken in my mind. I can't figure out how I feel about this movie. I think the filmmaking is all really interesting and really well done. It made me, like, I thought that was really cool, and I appreciated that, but I also didn't know what was going on while the film was happening. I looked it up afterwards, and it was surprisingly simpler than I thought, but you know, nothing about looking it up afterwards and realizing what actually happened absolutely blew me away for some reason. So on one hand, I was a little kind of let down and underwhelmed by the story, but on the other, I thought the technical elements were super cool and immersive and well done. So I'm kind of iffy on this film, but I do enjoy it a lot. And that is basically it for what I watched in the month of October. If you watched any films that you really loved in this month, definitely let me know down in the comments section down below. I'd love to see what you guys watched this month and what you guys loved. And that is basically going to do it for the video. I'm not going to have much of an outro. If you want to follow me on Letterboxd and see every time I watch and review a film, definitely do so. The link will always be in the description of all of my videos. But that is going to do it for the video, and I will see you all in the next one.